At this time, we'll entertain limited public comments. If you wish to speak, you have 3 minutes. Please come forward, state your name and address. Anybody? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item. Next item on there is the 2026 recommendation budget discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have several, obviously, included in your packet and shared with you earlier this week. We have several items related to the 2026 budget. First, historically, we give a financial review. There's a PowerPoint that Mr. Campbell will review and entertain any questions afterwards, and then we'll continue on from there. So I'll turn it over to Todd at this time.
Thank you, John. Good morning, Commissioners. We'll start on slide 3, if we could. Craig? Slide number 3. Yep, there we go. Perfect, thank you. So this first one, as you see, the taxable value for the county. So our projections for 2025 to 29 also gives a history. As you can see, taxable value for 25 is 4.02 billion, which is a 5.4% increase from 2024, with a projected 3% increase in 26 for a taxable value of 4.14 billion. And then the taxable value is projected to continue at the pre-COVID growth rate of 3% for 27, 28, and 29. Next slide, please. Next slide shows our financial forecast through 2029. And you see those numbers with the next slide on slide 5, if you could, Craig, is our major assumptions. So for revenues, as I mentioned, 5.4% increase in tax revenues expected 26. Inflation is projected at 3.1%, with uncapping and new construction making up the difference. Tax revenue is projected to increase an average of 3% from 27 through 29. And a cautious estimate is warranted, right, because due to the uncertainty of due to the uncertain course of the economy. Then federal and state, the next item, federal and state dollars projected flat due to the uncertainty of available grant funding, as well as revenue sharing and the like. Charges for service reflects a modest increase projection as activity continues to pick up. The next item are the next assumptions are the expenditures, personnel. Overall personnel costs are estimated to increase 4.25% in this next year. The appropriations in general, modest inflationary increases are projected. The appropriation of the capital improvement fund is projected to increase at a higher rate than inflation. Additional pension payments remain built into the structure of the budget throughout the 5-year projection. Next slide, please. This graph is the general fund unassigned fund balance projection. This graph shows unassigned general fund balance of 35%, which is a target for 25 through 29. Next, please. Next slide.
Todd, I have a question on that slide on the general fund.
Yep.
So looking back at 2017, we were over 45%, and you're in 25, well, the projection, but 24, looks like we were at around 32%.
Yeah.
What is driving that downward trend?
Oh, go ahead.
If I may, this graph only represents the unassigned portion of the fund balances. And during that time that you referenced, 2017 through 2024, specific assignments have been incorporated as part of the fund balance for specific purposes. Most significantly, there is an assignment for the pension and OPEB liability, potential fluctuation. And specific to 20, although this wasn't part of the question, I'll address it, in reference to the decrease in the unassigned fund balance from 23 to 24, we intentionally increased the assignment for OPEB in 2024 because of the change in the funding strategy. That was, if you recall, we have stopped making contributions. We're still awaiting the outcome of the actuarial evaluation to see the initial impact and future impact on the OPEB funding status, as well as to verify and validate that we can continue in that regard. So in order to ensure that there wasn't a surprise, frankly, we intentionally increased the assignment at the end of 2024, which specifically drove that, that decrease. Similarly, as part of the, we have, from 17 through 24, we have strengthened assignments, including the initial assignment that I referred to for pension and OPEB during that time. So, so it's not a reduction in fund balance overall, and in fact, in 2024, the total fund balance increased. This only represents those portions that are designated for specific purposes. Excuse me, assigned, I want to use the appropriate word.
I know what you meant.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Todd.
Oh, not at all, thank you. So the next slide, number 7, into that OPEB that John just mentioned. For the, this graph shows the level of funding for the county's OPEB, the other post-employment benefits, which is essentially retiree health care. So funding percentage is anticipated to incrementally return to the target funding range as contributions are projected to be scaled back. And as John just mentioned, in 24 and 25, there was 0 contributions, and 26 is projected to be the same.
What were we contributing like that last year?
Well, in 2025, it was 0 contributions.
Right.
The last time contributions were being made, they were being made at 1% of a payroll.
And what was that, do you know that dollar amount roughly?
Donald?
So I can,
Yeah, I don't have that readily available, but I certainly can get that follow-up. And back to the previous discussion about the fund balance assignment, if the strategy does not bear out the way, we're protecting against a shock to the budget in terms of that fund balance assignment.
So am I right in assuming then that that OPEB funding percentage decreases, that the general fund unassigned balance should increase?
That would be the intent, yes.
I have a question about page 4. So when you look at the net projections for 27, 28, and 29, does that mean we're in the minus? Whereas we are bringing in less money than we are expected to spend those years?
Based on that forecast, yes. The net projection, that negative number of 27,000, based on the forecast, that would represent a utilization of fund balance.
So the money would have to be transferred from the general fund to cover the expenditures for those years?
Well, it would be, yes, it would be, we're talking about the general fund, so it wouldn't be transferred to the general fund. It would just be a utilization of the existing fund balance resources.
Okay, and that is in addition to the other slide where it says that we are not contributing to the OPEB, so meaning like that's really kind of, because if we're not having to contribute and we're having a deficit, is that something that you typically see over the years?
It depends on the year,
Okay,
and nothing I've seen so far is any different, has been for the last 25.
I would caution you in referring to it as a deficit. But it does represent a forecasted utilization of fund balance in those outlying years, 27, 28, and 29. Given the assumptions that we reviewed. It is not part of the current budget. I would suggest that in future budget development, those variations in the projection would be addressed in that it would be adopted in a balanced format. So, again, this is a multi-year forecast that if all of the trends hold true, would represent a minor, I would like to stress that, utilization of fund balance. Now, that's not what the budget development would look like when we get to that point in terms of preparing that budget.
appreciate that.
If I could add to that, as Commissioner Showers mentioned, if you look back at prior several, you're gonna, in this 3-year, this projection, you're gonna see similar, where it's gonna be, show the, well, again, not to use the word deficit, but you're gonna see that negative number, and then.
When the expenditures.
Right, but when you develop that budget that year, it ends up, as John mentioned, it ends up balanced and
Part of the budget.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. So now we're on slide 8, I believe. So the target funding for OPEB, just some quick rundown. As we mentioned, well, in previous discussions, reasonable target for OPEB funding is between 100 and 120%. Current funding level as of 12/31/24 financial statements, the annual audit is 156.4. And then per the 12/31/24 financial statement, no annual contribution is currently required, as John alluded to earlier. The county is currently having an actuarial evaluation as of December 31/24 conducted. We're expecting that any time. And we're required to have at least every 2 years, but because of the changing model of zeroing out the contributions currently to bring that down, the fund balance down, we're doing an annual just to see what we want to be able to, we don't want to wait 2 years to see what the impact is. And then bottom line is retiree healthcare trust fund is stable. The next slide, number 9, pension, defined benefit to defined contribution, DB to DC. Clinton County has 2 pension vehicles, the defined benefit and the defined contribution. They're since 2007, began closing defined benefit, depending on where non-union or the collective bargaining units, all the way through 2015 for new hires, have switched over from the defined benefit to defined contribution. So all current plans are closed, and the number of what this table shows you is the number of folks that are current active employees that are enrolled in the defined contribution, and the number of active employees enrolled in the defined benefit. So we are making that solid steps, forward motion for getting at some point in the future to 100% DC. But you can see currently we're at 76% of our active employees are enrolled in DC, and 24% are in DB. And again, that happens through attrition. Slide 10, the DB pension funding, percent funded. You can see there's a history on the bar graphs, but 2024, per GASB 68 is 101%. That is from our 2024 financial statement. And then the projection is 25 through 28. Those are per the December 31/23 actuarial evaluation. Next slide.
Before you go on to that,
Yes, sir.
just so everybody understands, these are projections. If we need to make it 100%, we have the cash to do it. This is not a deficit. We actually have the money in the unassigned fund. If there was some reason to do that, and the reason I bring that up is some of our fellow counties, they're lucky to be funded at 50%. And they don't have any money in their unassigned balance to make it up, and they're in deep trouble. We are not. So.
Absolutely, thank you very much. The next slide, number 11, annual pension contributions. To Commissioner Shower's point, this graph shows the amount of annual pension contributions, and as we talked about, the current budget has these payments built in. So payments of $2.4 million from 22 through 29 are recommended to maintain the projected funding in the target range of between 90 and 110%. The brown section of the bar graphs here represent an amount above the $2 million, which is $400,000 that would be drawn down from the general fund assigned pension reserve, as John had mentioned that earlier.
Now, if those actuarial assumptions change, usually based on an interest rate, usually you can have three assumptions, a very conservative, up to a more.
Oh, yes, the annual evaluation does include a sensitivity analysis with a variation of plus 1% in terms of the long-term rate of return, and minus 1% as well.
Right, so if we were looking at that rate of return of, say, 6.9%, but say it actually came in at 3.5%, we would see this number, this 400,000 from the general fund, that number would need to grow to fund that.
Potentially,
Because these are
potentially, yes.
projections.
Yes.
Okay.
And those actuarial assumptions are determined by MERS system-wide. They use uniform assumptions for all of their member municipalities. They are on a 5-year evaluation for the assumption study and update. They are in the process of reducing the long-term rate of return. I think their ultimate goal, if I remember correctly, is a long-term of 6.5% is their target, at least currently. But they do a 5-year experience study. I do not recall off the top of my head when the last time that occurred. So they are making changes in the assumptions. Again, to your point, most significantly, the assumptions are with the long-term rate of return as well as mortality and
Excuse me, just for a second, Mr. Chair. Some of you aren't familiar with PA 202, maybe you are. I know Brian would be because he's been in the state. That's Public Act 202, which was passed, in 2017, I think, which required all municipalities to have their unfunded liabilities funded to 60%. If you in fact hit the threshold, then you seem to be okay. But I'll give you an example as to why you should be real confident with us. Another county that will go nameless, try to be careful here. They have a 38% unfunded liability for their pension. The number is 220 million is what they owe. So according to the state statute, they're okay, but they're not okay. There's another county here locally that they have to come up with $63 million between now and 2040. They can't pass any millages to keep their cops and their sheriff deputies on board, but they had to come up with $63 million in the next 15 years. They're broke. We're not. So we never have been, so.
I'm just gonna bring up, I'm just bringing it up for the new commissioners
certainly,
that
certainly.
aren't, but.
It's good.
Yeah, I mean, we're really, I'm keeping close tabs because I just want to make sure that, we are
Absolutely.
really sitting in a nice position for our employees and staff.
The other thing I would mention in terms of MERS, their strategy relative to volatility in terms of the actuarial valuations is they use a 5-year smoothing in terms of the impact. So to say it
It decreases those
favorably,
peaks and valleys.
correct. If there is a significant downturn in the investments, which reduce the current year rate of return, you experience the impact of that on the valuation over 5 years rather than in the 1 year of the valuation, again, to avoid volatility in the contributions. And the same thing is true if there are significant gains. You don't realize from a contribution reduction standpoint all of that favorable activity in 1 year. It's smoothed out over the same period of time. So
Just trying to make the contributions a little more comfortable and
Correct.
palatable.
Correct.
Yep.
They would have a 5-year, 6-year downturn, would that make things different?
Theoretically, yes. I mean, if there was a consistent trend in one direction or the other, that would have an impact on the longer-term contribution rates in those future years.
That happened when you've been in public
Actually, what MERS has done is they used to do that over 10 years in terms of the smoothing. So they have, it was in the past 10 years, they've reduced that or the smoothing period to 5 years, which has increased the impacts that you will experience, but I can't recall a sustained trend one way or the other that in my experience for that length of time.
If that really happened, it's called depression. We'd all be broke, so.
I have a question about the retiree healthcare trust fund. Is that within the OPEB fund? Because I know we experienced some cost increases, which would some increases to the retiree healthcare overall cost. Is that a part of I guess how is that affected by the change to the healthcare provider, just the overall increase in costs that we've experienced?
Similarly, I mean, there are two separate trusts, one for the pension and then one for the OPEB. So when we talk about them, we're talking about them separately. However, to your question, the increase that was experienced in terms of the cost for health insurance this year will have an impact if that continues into the future. I mean, there are rate assumptions in terms of increases in the cost of health insurance for retirees that are factored into the actuarial evaluation for that trust itself. And to the extent that actual increases in health insurance costs on a continual or ongoing basis exceed that rate assumption, one of two things will happen. The funded level and the cost will increase which will reduce the funded level, or the long-term assumption for those costs will be adjusted to more accurately reflect what is happening to the trust itself. We are required under PA 202 to have it's either 5 or 7 years, to have an independent actuarial audit of our actuarial evaluation to validate and confirm the assumptions that are being used to make sure that those are accurate and reflective of what is occurring. And I believe we are scheduled to have that conducted in 26 or 27. So we are working on that as well. That's one of the requirements
Help make sure that we've got.
to ensure that those funding projections remain accurate.
Not to be Budinsky, but if we don't grow our tax base, we will have problems. Most counties right now, particularly those that are very rural in their character, they can't meet their healthcare costs now because they have no growth. There's no residential growth, there's no commercial growth, there's no industrial growth. And as a result, they're suffering where we, by luck, I suppose, we border two very liberal counties that some of their people don't like us, so they move here. Because we're more reasonable tax-wise. That's why we're able to stay ahead of it, because we're actually growing our revenue base. And I don't think any of you ever said to me, "Wow, we want to have more millages," and we don't do that. We've never done that, except when we absolutely necessarily have to, like 9/11 or others like that. And since we've been able to do that, we stayed ahead of the game. But I've heard of many woes and cries from county commissioners in these other counties that have no growth. And they're having a problem. I've heard all the fixes. Well, there are no fixes. The only fix is to grow your revenue stream. So,
And 75% of our revenue base is tax.
Yes.
Property taxes. So that's
most
where your
of it is
growth.
residential, man. So.
Yes, yes.
So, the next slide, slide 12, is, again, talked a little bit about it, but just really quickly, this shows the GASB 60 funding trend for pensions from 2019 to 24, and you can see from the funded ratio, 103% in 2019, a high of 115% in 21, and currently in 24, it's at 101, as we've said before. The next slide, slide 13, shifting gears to the Public Improvement Fund. Graph shows available public improvement funds. So you can see by this graph, 15.6 for major 15.6 million for major improvements, 11 million for equipment replacements, and then 3.9 million for other capital items. And then lastly, the last slide is just in summary, with the current economic environment, budgets remain affected by inflationary pressures, particularly related to labor markets and health insurance costs. Given the nature of local government financing in the state of Michigan, revenue growth, of course, is limited, as we know. Meeting pension obligations that we've just been discussing and capital improvement needs will continue to remain a top priority. Availability of funding for new programming opportunities will be limited. So thank you very much. If any more questions, or otherwise, I'll turn it over to John to go to the next step.
Thank you, Todd.
Welcome, thank you.
Continuing on, you all received the budget recommendation from my office. Overall, the budget is essentially a continuation budget, or not, there is not a significant program expansion. There are some things I will highlight relative to new position requests, new position recommendations, and then we'll review the capital requests and entertain any questions. Overall, the budget increase is a 5.2% increase from the revised 25 budget. Again, from the previous discussion or presentation, we have continued to focus on maintaining those legacy obligations and adequate funding for those to ensure that we meet those obligations relative to OPEB and pension. The total, I'll focus on the general fund, but the total budget that's being presented to you is $65.1 million. The general fund is slightly over $31 million in terms of that total. We discussed property tax and property tax growth, keeping in mind that the property tax rates are limited and constrained by Proposal A. They're, if the actual taxable values increase greater than was capped by the statute, the property tax rate needs to be rolled back. The budget is based on what is currently the maximum allowable rate, which is 5.7617, which is a rolled back rate from the authorized maximum of 5.8. Again, that will be subject to evaluation and potentially potential reduction based on the actual equalization process that will occur in 2026. As was mentioned, property tax represents 75% of the revenue for the general fund. And of that total, I think the point was also referenced that the residential class is the largest portion of the property tax values, and that represents 71.4% of the total taxable value. One item just to reference, the budgeted property tax that will be realized has been incorporated net of the eligible veterans property tax exemptions. Just to point that out, those vital exemptions represent, I think, for this year, approximately $175,000 of county tax revenue. Again, that was authorized at the state level, passed down to the local units, and there is no reimbursement from the state for the property tax loss. I'm not suggesting there is a concern with that exemption itself, but it does impact at the local level. One of the most significant areas, the next most significant area in terms of revenues is federal and state revenue. There is some uncertainty, obviously, at the state level right now because the state has not finalized the budget. The budget, the recommended budget was, there were some updates last week based on some sudden activity at the state level in terms of budget recommendations. So there have been some adjustments downward in terms of where the state budget is, or excuse me, the county's revenue is. There are what I characterize as three sources of state revenue. There are general purpose revenues, which is essentially the county revenue sharing, which has been reduced in terms of our revenue projection by $200,000 based on recent activities. Statutorily directed revenues, which are for specific statutory purposes. Two good examples are the judicial standardization. The state pays to standardize the local costs of all judges' salaries that are funded in part at the local level. And then program-specific grant revenues, a couple examples are the secondary road patrol program and that funds law enforcement activities through the sheriff's office, crime victims' rights support, which is a grant program that funds staff in the prosecutor's office. When we evaluated those, again, there is no final state budget yet. So we essentially are recommending no increases where is appropriate. We're recommending stable, essentially same levels as last year unless we have direct information that would suggest that there's likely a reduction, which again, as I mentioned, we have made an adjustment to state revenue sharing because those the legislative budget that was approved by the House obviously still needs to be dealt with it in the state Senate, but does include reductions in revenue sharing. So we don't anticipate growth or significant growth in that revenue source. So we are recommending that be adopted at a lower level than this current year.
John, can you remind us, so the state deadline is October 1st for their budget? Are we on the same?
No, this budget will take effect January 1st.
Okay.
So to your point, Commissioner, if there are significant changes that would affect state revenues that were included in this budget, we, as staff and the Board of Commissioners would need to reevaluate what that adopted budget would be I'll say, worst case scenario, if there are significant reductions that are realized when the budget is finalized, I would recommend that January 1, you would make an amendment to your budget. I would recommend you do it before that because it hasn't taken effect. So again, that's worst case scenario. But to your point, this budget will be adopted kind of right around the same time that the state might finalize theirs. The state has till September 30th, October 1st. You will be asked to adopt this budget in mid-October.
Okay.
So I would expect that we will have a final determination by the time you are presented this budget.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, it will be at the end of October. Your meeting will be sometime that last week. I would have my fingers crossed that the legislature will have some resolution prior to you considering this, because if not, there would be significant other issues that we'd be working on relative to this year's budget potentially, depending on what action is taken, so.
I have a question. At the bottom of page 2, the $21,000 amount from under federal and state, it says the recommended budget includes a slight decrease. So that's just the amount that has affected the budget, and that's not the estimated loss of funds or,
That's the net decrease.
okay. So what was the amount that was estimated to decrease from federal and state that led to that, I guess? Because you guys had to ballpark it, I would imagine.
Yes, most significant in terms of that is, as I mentioned, the revenue sharing.
Yeah.
That reduced by, again, 250,000, I can't remember now off the top of my head. But we reduced that projection by $200,000 based on the recent activity. The other program uncertainty, some of those items will increase statutorily, so there are slight increases
Our
in
contributions
some
to
of
the
those.
different types of funds.
Yes, but
Okay.
overall, it represents a net decrease at the combined between the federal and state. So some of this, the federal, I haven't quite gotten to that yet. The general fund budget only includes approximately $152,000 in federal revenues. So there is some exposure if there are further reductions at the federal level that may come through, we are not aware of yet, but things tend to change suddenly these days.
Okay.
And those are the federal revenues that are included in the general fund are all supporting specific activities. Two primary activities in the general fund are, that they're supporting our emergency management, which there have been reductions, and we've incorporated some of those revenue reductions, estimates. And then there are revenues that are specific based on, collection activities in the front of the court. So, in terms of the general fund, there is not much direct exposure in terms of further changes at the federal level.
Good, okay.
The next significant revenue category is the charges for services. Those are fees that the board has authorized or are otherwise authorized by statute to be charged for activities based on services provided. Those continue to trend up based on activity. In summary, as far as the revenues go, we just covered what represents about 92% of the general fund revenues. Historically, and continuing on, our revenue estimates are conservative in nature. We would obviously like to continue that trend of underestimating revenues rather than overestimating them, relying on them and building in increases within the expenses that may not, based on revenues that are soft. So I'll stop there if there are any questions about revenues in the general fund, or I'll continue on, whatever is.
Would the opioid funds go into federal?
No, the opioid funds are in a separate special revenue fund that's required by the state. I'll cover those as part of the review of the packet for the other funds, but those are not affected, or not part of the general fund, except the county general fund receives revenue from the opioid funds for the grants that were authorized that are funding portions of the specialty courts. If you remember, there were two programs in the courts, so there is revenue coming into the general fund from those opioid funds.
John, I had a question, but it's on down farther in the packet by the pie chart. Are you gonna cover that later, or would that be appropriate to bring up now?
You can bring that up.
I was just curious on the interest and rents part. It just looks like that fluctuates quite a lot from year to year. So I was just curious what causes that to change.
Well, most significantly, obviously, interest rates, and that impacts the revenue. And again, based on the conservative nature of the budget preparation, we consider that a soft revenue.
Gotcha.
So we do not project out what the maximum would be in case there are, obviously economic changes and interest rate reductions that would reduce the earnings.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So that is an example of one that will always overperform the budget because we don't build that into an ongoing recurring revenue that we will end up relying on.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. The next section that we'll talk about is the expenditures. As I mentioned, it's largely a continuation budget. The general fund budget does include a net increase of just over 2 FTEs. There are some changes that have occurred that the board has authorized during this year that are part of that. If you recall, there was an addition to staff in the treasurer's office. There's also an addition of staff in pretrial services. Those are now incorporated into the budget for 2026 as part of the adopted budget. My budget recommendation does also include the addition of 1 FTE in animal control. I think it's a need the sheriff has attempted to address through his requests. We obviously have animal control officers, but when they are out on responding to calls and there is no one available in the animal control to multiple things. make sure that the animals are taken care of in the facility, as well as being able to respond to incoming calls and concerns. And so there's an increase in the recommended budget for an administrative support position in animal control. Another change, we continue to deal with changes in the childcare fund grant and making, excuse me, have determined that an additional 1.25 FTE is now can be included in that grant, which will further maximize the state reimbursements and reduce the general fund costs. So that represents a change in the funding source. And then outside of the general fund, there is one additional FTE represented in central dispatch to increase by one telecommunicator to obviously deal with increased activity and to improve the coverage by adding an FTE. We'll be able to improve overall coverage by adding a scheduled position to a shift, so.
24/7 operation, meaning they
Yes.
need that so they don't burn their people out.
And currently, they're doing it with swing shifts, and it will change the scheduling a little bit by adding another FTE in that. I was eventually, because there's obviously a 9 to 12 month training process in terms of experience-wise before someone is actually filling one of those stations on a active basis. The personnel costs, the costs include a recommendation for 3% cost of living increase for the non-union employee population. That is incorporated into the recommendation. The represented units have included contractually agreed to increases where those have been settled. There are several, as you know, Madam Fickus, there are some contracts that have not been resolved yet. So what we have done to make sure that our financial projections have going forward project a accurate representation of what we expect. I've increased the contingency for what will potentially be settlements, increases, and potentially, depending on the timing, retroactive application. So we've attempted to incorporate that into both the recommended budget and the financial forecast that we reviewed earlier. One of the other things we talked about was increases in the health insurance costs. We all will recall what those increases were for this plan year, which started in May. The transition to the fully insured program through the West Michigan Health Insurance Pool has locked in those renewals through the end of December of 2026. The increase that is referenced within the budget is the $600,000 increase. That's in comparison to what was adopted in the previous year prior to those changes. So in terms of the actual increase that will in costs, they won't change for this year starting in January of 2026. But from a budgetary perspective, we need to increase the budget obviously to match that. And I wanted to note, I think it's important that the health insurance costs, those affect every department and every fund that has personnel budgeted, but within the total increase of the general fund budget recommendation that you are presented, 40% of that increase comes from that increase in the health insurance costs. So obviously, I think Todd mentioned it during his presentation. Those legacy costs and health insurance, those are the ones that we are most focused on, making sure that we are properly managed, maintained, and moving forward within the budget itself. Before I get into any of the other, the specific changes within departments and funds, I also want to point out that the budget that you are presented, or being presented, is based on 100% employment. Obviously, we know throughout the year that there are natural changes in employment, retirements, resignations, and so forth. There are not, what we've been hearing reported, there are not vacant positions budgeted, but it's budgeted based on full employment for the entire year.
State of Michigan.
As it naturally occurs, there is savings that occurs because we don't operate that way all year. But we don't rely on savings within the budget development and adoption to account for that. That's why we budget at the full employment, to make sure we are.
Because you don't know when
We
you're
have our
gonna fill
maximum
them.
exposure, included, and any vacancy that may occur results in savings to the budget overall.
Bob actually just brought up a good point. So there's this conversation in Lansing about like these ghost employees at the state level where like positions are funded but not filled, and then, so do we currently have any positions that are being budgeted and then?
There are no ghost employees. All of the authorized positions are filled, and from my perspective, as well as the department heads and elected officials, are vital and necessary. And when there is a vacancy, it affects operations. So no, to your question, there are no ghost positions within this budget.
So when there are, like, if a position's not filled for a month or two, what happens with those, like,
Those
dollars
appropriate,
just get absorbed into, like, the dollars that we have budgeted for that position that aren't being filled at that time, does that just get absorbed into the general fund, or like what happens?
they're fully appropriated within the general fund, so any vacancy, which results in savings to that appropriation, lapses to the general fund, at year end.
Okay.
So,
We always budget at the full FTE that's appropriated. We always budget at that full amount. Like what you were referring to with the state was they were calling it money laundering because of, which is purely a bunch of bunk. But yeah, in this case, yeah, you always fund at the full FTE, the appropriated FTE, whether it's a filled or unfilled vacancy.
I had written that into my message and communication before it became an issue, in the media, so, I'm glad you raised that question, so. I'll continue on with the specific, departments and activities. The, front of the court, which is a, separate, special revenue fund funded by, federal grant. We made changes last year, that were incorporated into the 2025 budget relative to the staffing. We eliminated a separate contract in the prosecutor's office, rolled that into a consolidated contract in the front of the court. And the increase in the appropriation, the $50,000 increase in the appropriation that is incorporated, again, relates to the county share of those personnel cost increases. I mean, that's all personnel in the front of the court. Central dispatch I referenced, there is a recommendation to include or to add a telecommunicator position. However, overall, the budget has reduced by 13% because there were capital projects that were ongoing last year and have been completed, so those expenditures don't carry on and continue to the budget. And those will remain ongoing. I mean, the central dispatch is one of the best examples of an operation that is being impacted by technology. And they keep Mr. Thalen and his staff busy in terms of maintaining the technology within the central dispatch. But again, that's not a general fund expenditure. I mean, those are in a special revenue fund with its own funding source. Child care fund, I mentioned that a little bit, but the county's appropriation to, the general fund appropriation to the child care fund is set at $611,000. That's based on the funding formula at the state for the programming. Some of the the components have increased to a 75% reimbursement from the state rather than what was historically a 50-50 cost sharing. Planning and zoning, historically, it's always been presented together, so I kept it that way, but obviously, you're all familiar with the changes that have occurred organizationally in terms of the staffing. Building department is a self-supporting activity accounted for in a enterprise fund, and those permit levels fully cover the cost as would be expected in a enterprise fund. Planning and zoning is a general fund activity, and the permit and fee revenues do not cover 100% of the departmental related costs, so there is a general fund subsidy in the related to the planning and zoning activity.
John, on this front, with this director position, if we try to hire somebody and we're unsuccessful on that front, what does that look like from a budget standpoint? Do we need to, at that point, look at contracting? Do we need to look at working with what we have as existing staff? Like,
It would remain subject, I guess, to further evaluation. I'm not, I mean, one of those two, potentially, yes. I mean, well, I would say no, not necessarily going without a director and dealing with it with existing staff. I don't think that we would have adequate capacity to be able to continue that. So if it were to, it would be a recommendation that I would have to make if it were to reevaluate or reassess the salary that's being considered, or being offered, or if it was more practical, although it would likely be more expensive, to continue to contract on a long-term basis. But so,
it's like a bridge that we cross when we get there, sort of deal.
I mean, that's one of the things that we're currently working on in terms, obviously, of filling the position or and continuing with the current contract extension through the end of the year. And that was why that recommendation was made. And to that question, I would just also, as the topic came up, Mr. White, Tanner, who was on National Guard deployment, he returned this Monday, the 8th. So we have increased our county resources that are available as he transitions back into doing that, and reducing some of the reliance on the contractual services that we were approved. So. Community mental health, that appropriation did not increase. The current appropriation level was sufficient to cover with the requested increase that, or the requested change that came through Tri-County Community Mental Health. The increases vary based on a very complicated formula I won't bore you with, based on the increases of activity between the three participating counties, Clinton, Eden, and Ingham. So sometimes our increase is greater than what the overall is based on utilization, and sometimes it's lower, but we didn't need to change that budget. Continued the same support that we have historically for the recommendation for the Conservation District, as well as economic development activities. I have recommended continuation of those activities, including both the Michigan Career Quest program that was discussed last year during the budget development, and as well as the continuation of the contractual services for LEAP.
God bless you.
I have a question about the conservation district. Is there a reason we don't give like a little percent that, you know, with respect to inflation?
For that group, and I'm just curious, it's,
In my research and reviewing it since I've been here, I haven't seen any change. So
okay,
if If they were to seek additional funding, obviously we would become part of the discussion and conversation and evaluation, but we have not received a request for increase in my time here and going back several years prior to that.
Okay.
Can I say about 10 years ago, it was very controversial. I don't recall exactly what the controversy was about, but it had to do with the funding. And some of the commissioners thought that $12,000 was too much. Is it? I don't know. I never thought it was, but this is long before anybody else was here. And so they've not asked for more in all that time, so
Oh, okay. I just know they run on a very, very tight, small budget. So.
they do.
Okay. Thank
They
you.
do good work, by the way.
Yes,
so.
they do.
But that's why, so. And some of those commissioners are no longer on this earth who have made that decision, so.
Noted.
Yes, sir.
Question regarding facility and fleet services, and when I look at the costs associated with utilities, fuels, and contracted services and such, I'm wondering if there's any attempt that we're gonna move away from business as usual and look into some of the environmental protections and alternative vehicles that are out there to decrease some of those other factors.
Specific to your question about alternative vehicles, I know we have acquired, if I recall correctly, we have acquired a limited number of hybrid vehicles. We have not, to this point, purchased any fully electric. Couple reasons. We have limitations as far as charging capacity or ability to do that. So that has not been a specific consideration, but it is the reliance on, as you put it, business as usual is always taken into consideration if there are more efficient or ways to provide those facility and fleet services. But there has not been a specific directive to prioritize or a transition to that type, and I'm speaking of that from the board level. I mean, if the board wants to make that a priority, we could certainly take that into account, but it is always a consideration, but it's not a mandate that is being followed.
It'd be helpful to have information to be able to make informed decisions as you pursue this.
I know at least for public transit, if they went to electric, that would be a nightmare. Their capacity to do their job sufficiently would be really limited to go to electric for the buses. So I hear what you're saying, but I think to John's point, efficiency should be priority number one on this front right now.
I'm so proud of our blue bus though, and
Yeah.
their ability to be flexible and adaptable. That's
Yeah.
something that public transits around don't have.
Didn't they convert most of those, if not all, to propane now? I think most
can't
of them
remember
are,
offhand.
most of them are
All
propane.
the propane, yeah.
They actually have a propane tank out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some are and some aren't. They run on some, I don't know if they have any diesels left, but gasoline, propane is the main, two main.
I know there was quite a cost savings going to the propane. Well,
I would just hate for Grandma to get stuck on 127 in an electric bus on the way to the hospital. Like,
Well, in the past, in another lifetime, I was involved in a county fleet conversion to propane. It was actually has a little bit more limited application for a fleet like, we maintain. It was being piloted with limited success, but based on the vehicles that were appropriate and available for that conversion, it was not, had not been fully implemented yet. Obviously, the biggest portion of our fleet is sheriff patrol vehicles. Although I think it may have the ability, there was some safety concern about the patrol vehicles having a propane tank in the trunk, at least from the law enforcement that I was involved with. I have not had that conversation with our sheriff and undersheriff, but it's something that we can have a conversation with, but there are some operational and safety concerns in terms of, it's possible, but there are other considerations.
to me, everything's possible, some things just aren't practical.
Thank you, sir.
The hybrids, you say hybrid, do they convert to electric as they're driving down the highway, or are they just like fuel what are we doing with hybrids? I'm not against hybrids, that's a intermediate
No,
step that
we
makes
don't,
sense, but
we don't have any plug-in hybrids, in our fleet, correct, Mr. Wooten?
Right.
We do have some, I'm not even sure. Help me, I'm struggling, what do we call them?
It would just be a hybrid, not a plug-in hybrid.
The battery's charged by the running of the engine.
Yeah,
That's- Which is ideal, they're actually.
Perfect.
You
yeah.
fill it with gas, but it charges, it recharges the battery as it operates, so we have, what is the number we have of those at this point?
One.
Okay.
that's better than zero.
Agreed.
I have a question along the same lines, is that, have we done energy audits on the major energy consuming buildings for the lights and all those things? 'Cause I know people typically have done that a long time ago, but have we done that?
Rob, would you like to come up?
No.
Too bad, you're being invited.
Yes, we have, the last one was probably 4 to 5 years ago.
Okay.
John, I know we jumped ahead of here a little bit, so if we need to get back to where you were earlier.
Yeah, just reviewing the increases, I touched on briefly, the increases to the budget within the circuit court. The pretrial services obviously increased due to the addition of a position that was authorized. There are also increases in the projects for the specialty courts, the journey and veterans courts. On the expenditure side, an increased staff position to full-time based on the funding that was approved through the opioid grants that we inquired about, Commissioner Washington. I talked about the general funds appropriation to the front of the court, which is operated or accounted for in a special revenue fund to account for the federal grant. The total front of the court budget is 1.64 million, again, supported 66% by federal funding.
Can we jump back to economic development?
Sure.
Skip that one.
Oh, no, I thought I reviewed that, I'm sorry. The recommendation is for continuation of those partnerships and programs, including the continuation of the Career Quest program, which was discussed during last year's budget, as well as continuation of the contract services for the LEAP.
So I know there's strong feelings on that particularly on the board with the LEAP contract. So if we're budgeting for it, is that a separate vote that we take some other time on that contract, or is the renewal is it being included in the budget viewed as renewal of the contract, or do we have a separate vote on that
Well,
later on?
this is the final year of the current contract, so it would need to be, a contract document would need to be approved. If there is consideration to not continue that relationship, regardless of whether there's an appropriation or not, if there's not a contractual agreement, then the appropriation would be irrelevant, wouldn't have any.
So it's a multi-year contract I thought it was annual, but maybe I had that wrong.
There was a 3-year agreement that was signed, to my recollection, so.
And it would be the same as if you didn't fill a position, meaning you appropriated the money. If you didn't go through with it, it's the same as if you don't hire somebody for a job, the money.
Well, yes, that would be the
Sitting
case.
there, but it's not used, essentially.
Yes,
It
no,
would like lapse back, it would like lapse back to the general fund. That's kind of the appropriate term, correct, John?
yeah, I mean, or alternatively, I mean, if the board was going to discuss, and to your point, there's been some conversations, the board has not had at this level discussions about continuing that contract, but if that's going to be discussed and the appropriation would not be necessary, it could be removed from the budget. I'm only making a recommendation based on the assumed continuation of that agreement, so. That, which would be obviously entirely up to the commission. Continuing on, the county treasurer's budget has increased Percentage-wise, significantly, 28%, but it was due to the addition of the position that you approved earlier this year, that has now been incorporated into the budget. Fleet and facilities, overall, it was an increase of 132,000. We had some discussion about the ongoing activities in terms of changes and priorities. I don't know, I don't have anything further to add unless there are further questions about that operation. Indigent defense, again, that's a special revenue fund with a state grant. County's portion remains at 149,000, which is the statutorily required contribution. And the total cost of that program, including the grant, is now 2.1 million.
I have a question about facility and fleet services, just from a standpoint of how we strategically approach maintenance. I don't wanna get in the weeds, but that's something that the board could sort of set as a directive, is if we want to look at making sure that we maintain things in a way so that it saves us money in the long term, that would be sort of, is that, I know there's supposed, Clinton County's done a really good job with their finances because we don't overspend on things.
Correct.
And so I do see an opportunity to, for certain types of maintenance, that doing the work up front, doing that investment up front would save us money in the long run. I'm to the extent that that strategy is put forth, is that something that we would need to talk about as a board, or?
Well, a couple things. Yes, I mean, obviously it's something the board could set as a priority. To my knowledge, we are not actively deferring any vehicle maintenance, so, we're.
Most of the capital I'm talking about that infrastructure, that's not included in this line item, that's.
No.
Okay.
In terms of, I know, when Mr. Wooten and I have had preliminary conversations about the way the fleet is maintained, whether that's done, the current model, with, service repair shops, dealerships, et cetera, versus the ability or consideration of establishing an in-house garage. We are evaluating that. I would say that it would be premature for the board to set that as a priority, because we don't know whether it is cost-effective yet, in terms of the personnel costs, the equipment required, the supplies required, versus the amount of actual savings that would occur from doing that in-house. So it's something that is on our radar. I will say from past experience, the numbers have not worked out, but it's something that we are continuing to evaluate. I know Mr. Wooten is. We have discussed it multiple times and are continuing to look at it. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine was more with respect to the buildings and things like that, so if that's not encompassed in this particular line item, then it was an irrelevant comment.
John, do you mind if this time if we take just a 5-minute break?
I would appreciate it. Thank you. I need a drink of water.
We're just gonna recess for about
Hey, the chair and I are leaving before that, so we gotta get out. We got a meeting at 11:30,
Where's lunch?
Kellogg Center.
So you're telling us we could put on a coup here when you guys are gone?
Do what you want.
All right, folks, we're
Oh.
back on live here.
That's actually a good point. So if they're gonna be gone, and then I'm like, keep in
I'll
mind
explain
about
it to you
quorum.
Monday.
It might, if this goes past 12:30, it'd be just the three of you. So let's keep that in mind probably.
No longer have a quorum.
Yeah. All right,
All right.
Administrator.
Continuing on, next one, was in the communication was, the prosecutor's office. That budget is up, percentage-wise 14%, 220,000. Does include an increase in county funding for, the crime victims' activities. Still, again, from a previous conversation, assuming that the, grant funding is not reduced. So the, county's appropriation, or the county's subsidy, using the same term we used with the planning and zoning, has increased. And it does also, just to point out, it does, continue to include the, a provision for contractual appeal representation that has been approved by the Board of Commissioners while the, there are staff vacancies, and I've continued to confirm with the prosecutor that once his, when he achieves full staffing, that, the need for that contract will not continue, so, the next, obviously, next is public safety. The total for the public safety, which includes road patrol, corrections, emergency management, animal control, total is 10.9 million. It's a 4.2% increase from 2025. As I mentioned previously, there are still some unresolved issues with respect to collective bargaining agreements that we are working on resolving. And I recommended increase to staffing in animal control. No other changes in increases or decreases in staffing recommended. We'll point out that we were able to reduce the original requested budget significantly based on the action that the board took last month, I believe it was, in changing the inmate medical contract. We were able to reduce that, off the top of my head, I think it was by 150,000 in terms of the estimate that we were working with at the beginning of the budget compared to where we are now contractually. So I don't have anything specific further to add to the sheriff's operational or the public safety operational budget. We'll have some other comments about capital, unless there are questions from the commissioners.
Just confirming the jail conversation falls in the capital outlay you were saying, budget.
What jail conversation? Yes, sir, that would be a capital conversation.
Good question.
Other things that, in terms of considerations that we continue to take into, that are taken into consideration as we develop the budget overall. Cybersecurity remains a top priority for the county administration and IT, and commissioners, hopefully you take the routine training that you get, or the tests when you, that are conducted. All of the evidence and reports that I continue to hear is that the majority of cyber problems are user initiated in some way or another, whether it's downloading something that you're not intending to, or clicking on a spam email. So, I mean, we continue to focus on maintaining the user's awareness and attentive to that, or attention to that. And we do routine intrusion testing to make sure that there are no vulnerabilities, or if there are, they're secured. And overall, the comment about cybersecurity is it's never ending battle. so. Pension, I think we covered that, sufficiently, during the, financial review, unless there are questions from the commissioners.
About cybersecurity, and wonder, do most people or all people pass those tests?
You know, the majority do, and anybody that doesn't, when we send out monthly for the exercises, we know who clicked on that one, and then I normally try and go give them a little talk, just saying, hey, you know, this is why you shouldn't do that, you know, we noticed that you clicked on it, and just give them a little more education. So, yeah, a monthly thing. We do 3 times a year training. We use KnowBe4, which is a very popular, I think even the state uses them for trainings. They're usually like 5 minutes, a video saying, hey, watch for this, don't do this. So really the focus now is how do you recover? That's really now is our main focus. There's a lot of things that shuts our systems down. What happens then?
I should probably look out for that, because I haven't seen or taken that test.
We took the commissioners actually out. I think it slipped through the first time. And they're like,
Well, to your point, we also, your office also, monitors to make sure that they're being open and being, as well as with the testing, that people are actually taking the testing. We try to ensure compliance with, the ongoing testing, so.
maybe that doesn't take it, we're trying to look at their manager, hey, could you please send a reminder? We send out reminders, but could you remind them, please take the 5 minutes and go through the test.
Good news, he's not clicking on anything, so. Sorry.
Debt service is the next category. There are 2, outstanding, debt issues, both which have, a dedicated, funding source to provide the debt service. One is for the, the Central Dispatch Radio Project, and the other was, debt issued for the, Road Commission facility, which is being repaid, by the Road Commission. Succession planning, obviously, we continue to deal with, retirements ongoing and upcoming, and we try to plan accordingly, so we're positioned for, transition, in those, key areas. Public improvement. And there's, 30.6 million available in the, public improvement fund, projects in the next 5 years, totaling, over 8 million if they're all carried out. I mean, it's an annual budget with a 4-year, forecast in terms of the, upcoming capital needs. Ordinary projects, which by policy and by board action are, $30,000 or less. Those requests total, just under 1.1 million. It's a $42,000 increase over 2025. There are other, of that total, some of those are ongoing ordinary projects in the IT fund and the 911 fund, as well as in the grant fund, for the MIDC, and small, request for ordinary capital outlay in the building fund. I'll skip major capital improvements, we'll go on that one, we'll review that when we go through the other detailed document. Just referring back to the contingency, I did mention that briefly. The contingency is, recommended at $475,000, which is, higher than it has been, in previous years, but that's due to the unresolved labor issues that I mentioned, earlier in my presentation. I'll stop there without getting into the capital outlay and see if there are any questions. I know you guys, some of you, commissioners are on the headline, so we'll try to keep moving.
I guess just procedurally on this whole conversation, if we as commissioners have thoughts about additions or cuts or anything like that, is this the space for that, or is that conversation later on, or?
Well, I mean, you could certainly have that conversation now. I anticipate including, continuation of the 2026 budget discussion on your agenda for next week.
Okay.
Next week's meeting as well. But from my standpoint, if there are recommendations that you want to, I would prefer to, I guess, know what those are going forward, so I have time to prepare necessary changes, moving forward, so, but it's at, board can talk, as long as you have a quorum and you can, you know, if you wanna
I
have
guess
those discussions now, that's.
One of the things I was gonna have John do before we end, was just kind of explain for the newer commissioners, like what that process is, like what the steps are in the process, because there are, steps along the way. So just a brief overview.
Oh, sure. And I can do that right now. As far as the process, the next public process, other than further subsequent discussion at these meetings, the board will need to have its public hearing in October, and Penny, do you have that date? Sorry.
October 14th.
October 14th, it will be the public hearing on the budget. In advance of that, you know, you'll continue your work, make changes, have further discussions. The next scheduled opportunity to do that will be next Thursday at the regular Ways and Means Committee. Now, I will note that prior to the public hearing, there is not an additional scheduled work session or meeting of the commissioners. So if you want to have that discussion and make changes beyond your regular meeting next week, you would have to schedule an additional meeting.
They would contact me or make that request, or would that be directly to you?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to coordinate it, yes, certainly, because it would be a change in the schedule, so we would need to allow for posting and notification in terms of to meet the Open Meetings Act. So the more discussion, I guess, from my perspective, the more discussion you're able to have today, that would be appropriate. I mean, but if you're not prepared to do that, I mean,
Well-
it's going to be
Not
discussed.
necessarily have this proposal in mind, but just like, I know we've talked about planning and zoning a lot, and I don't know if it makes sense to, if there are local units that are interested in taking that on from the county, but they're a little bit concerned at the financial hurdles, I don't know if it makes sense for us to set aside some kind of fund for them to tap into, or we could offer some kind of assistance to make that transition easier. I don't even know, like, that concept is all I was gonna bring up. I don't know if that's appropriate for here or not, but.
Well, to me, that's a much larger discussion than the budget. I mean, I would not recommend you try to discuss an issue that significant within the confines of the budget, particularly in the discussion that the board had in July, I think it was July, maybe it was June, about the, you know, continuing at long-term at the county level. It's certainly a discussion and conversation. There are other considerations beyond the budgetary considerations that need to be discussed. So I don't know that it's something you can resolve before you adopt the budget. Those are just my comments, Commissioner.
I know Duplain wasn't happy with the decision we made, and Bingham, I know they took it off their agenda, but they had something recently too, that they were gonna request action of us to make changes there, so.
That was a miscommunication between their attorney and their supervisor. Their supervisor is in Newer, and he misconstrued what their attorney said.
Yes, ma'am.
So the ordinary capital improvements are where a strategy could be, a strategic approach could be used to determine the priority of what and how we maintain certain things, given the potential cost of failure in the future?
Yes, I mean, that's taken into consideration as part of that budget development.
Okay,
I mean, the ordinary versus major is really, that's a designation that's established by the board in terms of the cost, really. I mean, by definition, all capital has a longer term, life cycle rather than just an operating cost that, occurs within one budget. So the designation between ordinary and major is created by the board in terms of the cost.
strongly feel we should be very strategic with how we do things.
Well, I think if anybody has anything we need to address in dollar amounts, we need to give John information in advance so we can discuss it next week. I think that will help. So if you have some interest in something, please let John know so he can explain it to all of us at that point. Yeah, I don't know, on the planning and zoning, that may be a completely separate meeting down the road. So,
I was gonna go on to our capital items if, let's see, I covered that, I think. All, in the packet that I provided you, there's also, obviously also a staffing roster, referencing the additions, incorporation of those into the budget. On page 39 of that packet, are the ordinary capital items that, have been requested and, recommended. Many of those ordinary items, Commissioner, to your point, we have provisions in there for, general repairs, specific for like, parking lot maintenance, sidewalk maintenance, window replacements, et cetera. So many of those are ongoing and routine. We'll notice that, or we'll point out that there are, several, replacement projects incorporated in the ordinary capital outlay requests, for the fairgrounds, as well as, Green Haven, obviously, projects here at the courthouse and the jail as well. And then additionally, there are the, ordinary requests within central dispatch and the Parks and Green Space, which we inadvertently left out last year, but we managed to remember to put those in, so.
And these fairground projects are separate from the larger plan that we're looking at?
Yes, those are considered, maintenance projects that will occur.
we should acknowledge the fact that even though these dollars are in the major capital improvement fund in a certain year, does not 100% guarantee that that's gonna happen. So keep that in mind also. Things change from year to year.
What can determine, like if it's,
My apologies, Mr. Chairman, but
I just wanted
it's
to,
referring to the next section of projects.
oh, I thought we were going there already.
I was doing a brief overview of the
Oh, sorry.
ordinary, so. Thank you.
I was ahead of you.
You were. And then continuing on, page 41 through 44 are further description of what those specific ordinary projects are. Now to Chairman DeLong's.
Sorry, I was a couple minutes too early to make that statement.
If I go to the major improvement plan. These are obviously larger scale projects that we have identified as being necessary or wanting to move forward with. And these, under your board resolution, any one of these projects, before it is actually appropriated and incorporated for the specific dollars, it comes back to the commissioners for approval based on that project. In the Public Improvement Fund, there's currently $5 million incorporated for major improvements. A large portion of that is for significant replacement projects at the jail. I'll jump ahead to page 11 of the document that I'm working on. Safety improvements, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvements, which are estimated at $3 million. Some additional safety improvements within the booking area, and some control updates. Those are all projects related to the existing facility. I want to be clear, there is nothing in the major projects contemplated for a facility expansion or new construction.
Does this cover the, I think our intent was to see what it costs to update the current facility to some standard?
We are still awaiting the results of that assessment, which we should have within the next 2 months but these funds would be part of facility extension, life extension project, so to speak. Yes.
Will there be, in that study, getting off the subject a little bit, will it address how long these changes will last before we, maybe not my time, but in their time possibly, we'll have to look at a new facility?
I would expect that would be,
That was rhetorical in nature. I was actually asking for that to be included. Because there's, out in the world, there's the $92 million figure is shocking, to say the least, shocking to me as well. Which, when we started this project discussion 10 years ago, or not 10 years ago, a couple years ago, it was 36 million, which is a whole lot different than 92 million. So, to be fair to my newer colleagues in their future, they'll need to know that. And I don't necessarily have to know that because I probably won't be here when that happens, so.
When we've had those conversations and looked at some of the different options on the financing front, I know we had talked about, like, there's a couple different proposals we looked at that time. Some were dependent on county contributing, I think, what was it, 10 million towards the project? So I guess, this is probably a naive question, but like, where does that 10 million come from? Does that come from our general fund balance? Does that come from?
it could come from the general fund balance. There are sufficient funds available, or it could come from the public improvement because it's identified for a facility, or it would be. I just want to be clear, we're talking hypotheticals.
Right, yep. No, I guess, but the reason I'm asking that question is just like, you know, one, I want to get a sense of what those fund amounts look like, and two, from a budgetary standpoint, do we need to be contributing to that and building it and growing it so that when we have that conversation down the road, we have more to tap in? I guess that's kind of where I'm going with.
The primary source of, or the first priority source of county capital for a project of this would be the capital improvement fund. Second,
Is that?
there's 30.
30,500,000.
And secondarily, there could be a general fund contribution. Again, I'm not suggesting that, that would remain to be seen, but those would be the two initial sources.
To add to his question, and I don't think you can answer this today, nor am I asking you to. The $92 million figure is nebulous at best. I'm defining that as it's not realistic that it's gonna be that low in 5 years. And just so everybody's clear in the public can hear this as well, it's gonna require a millage to cover these costs for a long period of time, and that should be understood. So when I hear 92 million, I don't believe that's the right number. It's gonna be a lot more than that in 10 years, whatever the case may be. And we've never really had a discussion that I recall that we talked about if it happened tomorrow, what would be, what do we ask the public to come up with in terms of millage? I've heard one, I've heard two, 20 years, 30 years. That's not clear to me what that really is. And once again, this is hypothetical for the audience. This is hypothetical. You know, don't put on emails or Facebook that we're going crazy here in the county. We're not. I wish my political friends would quit doing that, by the way. But we don't know that. So
That is correct, and I can't answer that
I
without
know you can't
knowing
today,
what the
but it would
cost
be
of
good
it.
for them, for us
of
to
a
know in the
project would
future
be.
what, if it was $100 million in 5 years or whenever, what would you be asking the public to actually come up with in terms of a yearly payment of their, whatever millage percentage you gotta come up with, because we don't know. And I'm repeating what I said before. This whole thing started before John's time, before Todd's time. We were told 36 million, which was a lot, but it seems a lot less than 92 million or 100 million. I keep hearing these numbers. No one has really definitively said this is probably what it's gonna be.
Well, 5 years ago when we started that process, roughly 5, Rob?
Yeah,
5, 6? Has it been that long now?
yeah,
It did, the estimate did come in at 36 million,
right.
but over, I think that sticker shock about hit all of us.
Yes,
The discussion was postponed, another evaluation came back at, what, 2 years later, 3 years later, 63 million area?
it's going on.
And then again, when it came up, just, what, last year? It came back at 92. So we definitely need to be prepared down the road because it's gonna keep going up.
Well, and to that effect, we had significant increases due to COVID, though that was just completely unexpected, and it's doubled the cost of everything for everybody. And so it might be good for us to consider what a sweet spot might be from a standpoint of if interest rates were to dip, if the rate of cost increase was to level out, at what point, and to Zach's point as well, if we were to continue to sort of sock away some money towards that fund, we could find a place where it would cost the taxpayers a lot less to do this project. And that is when we might want to act, and keep track of all that stuff and have a plan.
And also, I think the mill question, obviously we gotta look at what our taxable base is for property taxes, and if we grow this county at a 6% rate, which I would love to see that would significantly decrease the amount of mills that you would need to levy if that were the case. The other thing, from my perspective, from a budget, rather than having an assessment, I mean, you have to have that done and what the building estimate is. But if you say, hey, look, we got $40 million to spend to build this, what can we do with that 40 million? So you're driving it. You're not allowing them to drive the cost. You're driving what it's gonna cost you. It's a little different shift, a little different perspective. I'm seeing that nowadays happening. So just food for thought.
I just want to be clear. Last direction I got was I'm not working on a public facility,
Right.
public safety facility, and based on this discussion, that's still the case, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Like I said,
all
like I
right.
said- like I said-
Long-term strategies and investments and savings strategies we have in place, and we'll continue to prioritize those, but I don't want to waste time unnecessarily, so I just,
Right, I agree.
again, I want to be clear for Rob and we have enough to work on, right, Rob?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
And my personal discussion was, this problem is not gonna go away. We can delay it, but it's not gonna go away.
Correct.
And whatever the proper process is to recognize what potential future costs are would be good to have that process begin to figure it out, so.
I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence on our end if we're going to get to that point.
Sure. Absolutely. Also, I guess, we do have I'll call it a placeholder, depending on, the direction that, the Fairgrounds Master planning process goes. We do have a provision in there for, project relative to Smith Hall in 2026. I consider it a placeholder at this point because later this month you'll be considering a proposal to undertake that, fairgrounds, master planning process.
What page is that on, John? I'm sorry.
On page 3 of the,
Okay.
major project. Two other things I wanna just make sure I point out, in the, capital, or the major capital on that same page, page 3. We do, have a provision, a budget provision in there for the, annual, comprehensive, or excuse me, the 5-year annual, 5-year comprehensive plan review that's required by statute if the, we go in that direction. And then I would also point out that the sheriff's office has, included a request, and you'll notice it's funded at zero, for flock cameras. I don't know if any of you are familiar with those, but they're, license plate readers. There's a further description back in the detail. There's a spot for it, but I felt based on that project, that, you should hear discussion about that before it was included to make sure you were aware of what that project is. I know the sheriff left. I asked him to be available to discuss that project, at your meeting next week, as part of the budget discussion. So it wasn't an error or a typo. That's why it's in there the way it is, just to bring it to your attention.
Is there a cost associated with it?
Yes, it's, 46,000 is the budget estimate,
46,000?
46,000.
You spend that much on toilet paper, okay. Jeez.
I have a question about the Smith Hall reclamation. So that would just basically be dependent upon the decisions that are made when we get the master plan back and
Yeah,
what we would decide to do.
any specific use of that budget that's included in this, recommendation would come, any specific project to use that funding would come back to this, committee prior to being undertaken. So. Central dispatch, I mentioned, there are, continued, upgrades and, changes to digital technology, et cetera, that are included in the major projects for next year. Total, again, is approximately just under 1.5 million. And then the IT projects, I don't know if there's anything really specific to point out, but obviously we continue to try to maintain our technology. And then vehicles on page 6. Routine continued replacements of vehicles. And then there are continuing on the future year pages for what are included in the 5-year estimates at this point and a detailed breakdown of all those. And then completing it with descriptions of what those projects, all of the major projects are. So tried to go through that relatively quickly so you could have time for questions and comments and or further discussion, because I know some of you are short on time. So I'll stop there for questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Talk to me about the fairgrounds. We had a master plan a long time ago. I don't know if it got fulfilled, because I keep hearing similar complaints every year from the folks who participate. Did we throw that away?
No, I think the date on it was 2009, I think, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah,
It was very limited. There was a single phase, and I think, well, there was a single phase, and then the second phase was I don't know what the term was, convention center. Convention is not the right word, but
oh, that was true. That Agri-Liquid took that off our
Correct.
plate, so they have
so
to-
those were the only 2 phases. The first phase was a lot of infrastructure improvements, which were undertaken at the time. There obviously was no development of a center of any kind. And as I said, that was, if I recall correctly, it was 2009. I may be off on the date, but it was substantially long time ago.
What was
I remember it.
described to me by some folks at the fair was that there was something like that in place, like right before the 2008 financial crisis, and that there was, I don't know if this was the case or if it was just speculation or not, but that whole economy kind of impacted? some-
Well, that could have had some factor on it. I don't know, from the notes and the records that I've seen, I don't know specifically. Obviously, there was no interest in pursuing that second phase of that, construction project. So to your question, that was the plan that existed. And I don't, obviously, today, it's not really valid anymore, so thus the, desire, the interest in having a new look at that.
Which brings my next point. I grew up in this area, and my wife was a 4-H'er. I know when they all come to our chambers complaining about something, we aren't the bad guys. But what I don't understand is, why are they coming here? If you can't, I'm not asking you to answer this question, this is a general statement. There shouldn't be any reason for them to come here. And that's happened more than one time before your time. Bruce and I, from years ago, there seems like there's a disconnect between whoever the management person is that the 4-H people should be talking with and what the management people should be telling us. So if there's a problem with a building, we should know about that long before everybody gets frustrated and shows up in our chambers. So I think there's, in between here someplace, whoever's responsible for the communications between the folks and us, there's a problem there, and I think that should be looked at. This is as nice as the way I can say it.
Agreed. I share similar concerns, that I have been working, had some communications with Commissioner Rudat relative to those concerns.
I understand.
And will be attempting to follow up on. And I would also indicate that part of the planned, project, the master plan project, is a evaluation or recommendation on how the organizational structure that sits over the fairgrounds long-term may differ than what it is now.
Yeah,
It's a very, it's a, I don't know what adjective I want to use.
I understand what you're saying.
Inefficient, process that we're utilizing right now, so that would be part of the, assessment.
I think that the lack of a master plan, I mean, we do own the grounds. I think we do own responsibility on maintaining things and utilizing that conversation and having that public line open. I think that the lack of a direction has probably contributed to that, and I think that adopting a plan, I think, will help a ton, getting people rolling in the same direction on the fairgrounds.
Theoretically,
Us in the county and,
Do we have a liaison between that board?
Brian, I couldn't hear you.
so I'm our liaison at the Farm Bureau meeting, so I'm attending those on a somewhat regular basis, and just through that, interacting with folks on the fair board, folks on the Farm Bureau board. I think that me being there, it sounds like there hasn't been somebody at those meetings for a couple of years. So I think just even that alone has helped a lot. Zach Wagner's been awesome, with opening that line of communication on his end, so I think things are definitely improved on the communication front. And I think this master plan, getting their input on that as well, I think will help us all roll in the same direction and jive.
I'm all for the master plan, makes good sense. My problem is, who's responsible to carry it out? Within our structure. And you're investigating that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good enough,
yes.
good enough.
Did you have a question?
I would, but I was, because they have to leave, so I was gonna let them, if they have any questions.
I just want to update on Gail Watkins is home. All of you that know about Gail's accident, I see him from time to time. He is meeting with staff for, as I understand it, with both organizations that he is part of. He's going to be involved in some Zoom meetings, which they can, I guess. He's upbeat. His injuries were substantial. He busted a number of ribs. Both lungs were punctured. It's been over a month and a half now. They put titanium strips, I guess you call it, to hold some of his ribs together so it doesn't puncture his lungs again. But he's home, he's been through rehab. He's very impatient. He's been my friend for 25 years. I know that. He says to me, when are we gonna play golf? I said, not this year. And me neither, for that matter. For those of you that care, my medication has been changed. I have to drink more of this, which means the final results are more trips to the facility, have no heart issues. And I plan on harassing you for the next 3 years, so. My wife has to be my chauffeur for a while. I do cheat once in a while, so in public know I do drive around DeWitt, so if you see me, get out of the way. But she drives. Otherwise, other than that, I'm fine. I've not had any incidents with feeling faint for several weeks now, and there it is, so. I'm still a Republican, if you want to know. That hasn't changed.
Excuse me. I do have a question on the vehicle fund. So when we're looking at these vehicles, are these new or replacement vehicles? And,
Let me get to that, but I don't want to misspeak. I don't recall.
this
any-
was on page 6 there.
These are all replacement vehicles, are they not, Rob? I don't think these are any new, they represent new vehicles, but they're replacing a vehicle in the.
Right,
yeah.
swapping out.
Doesn't expand the fleet.
What is the criteria that's used to determine, replacing the vehicle? Is it mileage, maintenance? What's the thresholds? Because a lot of times, I mean, just because a car is 5 years old, I know we just went through this with the state. If it runs great, and it's got 110,000 miles and the maintenance is low, keep it. We can keep it for, keep it running rather than incurring the cost of a new vehicle.
Yeah, really, I would.
Because we just bought 5 new ones like a couple months ago.
I would say it's a case-by-case basis. There's no set mileage, no set time. I mean, the use of a patrol vehicle is very different than the use of equalization's vehicle. 100,000 miles of those are not the same
Right.
wear and tear on a vehicle. So it really is a case-by-case. And then some of those patrol vehicles, even once we rotate them off the road, we'll put them into a lower stress position for a couple more years afterwards. So it really depends on the use of the vehicle and its specific history.
Right, because it's better to have the car running than not running for sure. Yeah, on a daily basis, okay. Maybe next time, like if you can bring like some of those, I don't know what those measurements are, like what you use, what the criteria is. Maintenance cost, I mean, if one has a low maintenance cost, I would prefer keeping the vehicle rather than buying a new one. See if we can get a few more years out of it, just kind of stretching that cost, but, yeah.
Well, and we'll provide some data, but I think the answer is that, we're doing that currently. I mean, and again, the largest portion of our fleet is patrol vehicles. So when a patrol vehicle is being retired because it's being taken out of service and, as a patrol vehicle, it's repurposed to another department or another use. So we're not replacing them, again, based on a specific mileage criteria or age, just to purchase a new one. But yes, we can provide.
But I mean, if we're using it in another area, it's still running, it still must be
Correct.
to run, yeah, okay.
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
We did just buy 5 new vehicles, correct, within the last several months? And those would have been for different departments.
I think there were
Yes.
3, was it 3?
Yes,
3 for the sheriff's office and then 2 for additional departments, correct?
yes.
Yep.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, because it just looks, we're like basically replacing our whole fleet in 2 years?
No.
Between last year, 14, between last year and this year, if we're putting 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, that's not a vehicle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
How many
8
total do we
vehicles
have in our vehicle
this
fleet?
year. Next-
Depends how you count. With trailers and UTVs, we're at mid-80s.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of vehicles.
Yeah, okay.
But just vehicles, like trucks, cars, what's that number like? You don't know?
Off the top of my head, I would think we're probably in the mid-60s.
Okay.
Do we have any ATV vehicles?
We just approved one recently.
Yeah.
Parks and Green Space.
Well, golf carts, we have any golf.
Not yet. Yes, we have several UTVs and one ATV. The Drain Commission still has one ATV.
John, if we're done on this, I have something else on waste management front, but I didn't wanna jump the gun.
Oh, go ahead.
The whole conversation on the Fowler site, the village had their meeting last night and they wanna still continue as business as usual on their site over there in Fowler. So I guess if that does change in the future or they'd wanna do something different, like, I guess how does that whole conversation on that facility shape and fit into our budget conversation?
I have to verify, but I believe, and I have to confirm with Kate, because I have not looked at it recently in terms of the I believe the budget request assumed continuation at the time, so it would not result in, if the decision changed, it would not result in a required change to the recommended budget.
Okay.
I'll verify that before next Thursday, but
And if I looked at it right, it looks like that's funded not from the general fund anyway, like I think.
That is correct.
Okay, so I said they wanna continue business as usual there, but I just wanna make sure that was on the radar.
the waste management activities are funded with the tipping fees
Okay.
at the landfill.
Any other questions?
I've got just a general comment. I do think it would be nice in the future to see what the net cost is of departments that have a revenue source, not a revenue source, but I guess it is a revenue source. Like if you're, like for animal control and you've got dog licenses, or you've got the parks and green space where people are renting shelters, it would be kind of nice to see that direct income to that department versus what we spend on it, just to know. I mean, don't expect that for this particular discussion, but I just think in the future, it'd be nice to sort of see how much each department brings in based on, what we know as their operating costs.
Okay.
That was just a general comment, not a question.
I feel like I remember seeing in other budgets before where there's like mission statements with each department. I know you had talked about maybe using the budget opportunity to kind of like look at shared goals or just, so do I have that right? There's usually mission statements with the budget?
Yes.
So do
The
we,
actual budget document when it's produced, yes.
do we need to look at those when we do the budget stuff next week or do those change often or like, I guess?
Those are, which ones do you?
I just have a memory of looking at older budgets and there was like mission.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
each department or each line, like, so I guess
Right.
when we have those budget conversations next week, do we need to look at those mission statements and see if we need to change anything with those or like who decides
Yes.
what those?
The elected officials or departments develop those.
Yeah.
So,
We could look at it and bring our comments in the next budget.
I don't think we're empowered to change them, we can simply suggest to them that you had this other idea. It's not up to us to change their mission statement.
Well, probably for the elected officials, I guess like if it's a department that's.
well, yeah,
we
that was,
oversee.
I looked a little perplexed and that was why.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the elected, I mean, the elected
So you
officials, that's
clarified
their,
that, so I.
not our monkeys, not our circus, but
I
like,
would-
I'm like thinking more anything else outside the budget that we would.
Things that are within our purview that could be, have an overarching strategy that everything sort of falls back on what their department goals are, what their mission is. When we make decisions, we want to make sure we're helping to achieve their goals. If any goals need to be adjusted, perhaps we could bring those comments next week.
And so this is just on the budget itself. And I've seen this in several others, and I don't know if this is something that we can do with the programming we have, but
I can't hear you, sorry.
I'm sorry,
I understand.
I'll try to bring this closer here. With like the actuals and the amenda and the request, when we look at like a revenue summary or an expenditure summary, is there any way to incorporate percentages so we can look at percentage change? I know some of it is built out here in the narrative or kind of in the boilerplate language there, but You know, when it's got changes here, I know sometimes it shows the dollar amounts, but would there be any way, like maybe in the future, somehow to incorporate a percentages in there so we could look at those
I
also?
would- It ends up in the final, yeah, specific to your comment about the changes column, that's only our working process. And in terms of the final adopted budget, we don't show that changes, because we just have the requested and the adopted.
Right.
And then I think it is replaced with a percent change column in the final budget.
Yeah, like,
It's there, we can put it.
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
but it's
that-
not
yes.
in that.
yeah, like if you're
Yeah.
looking from
Yeah.
like 24 to 25 and you want to see that percentage change and then those future projections, whatever they may be.
I'd appreciate that. I mean, I kind of looked at that too, just to kind of get a sense of where there was bigger changes or where there was lower. And you addressed, I mean, anything that I saw that was a large increase or decrease, you touched on
Yeah.
the front end, so.
But
But that would be handy though. I would appreciate that if we could.
along those lines, for people that are new, it would be nice to see, and again, I'm not saying we do this by next week or whenever, but for me, it'd be really nice to see just sort of the last 10 years. And you look at the different departments and how each year cost has, and so you can see which ones are growing at faster rates than the other. And, you know, a lot of times there's explanations with laws that have been passed or things that are required of that department. I do feel, you know, because you look at, so what 24 was and 25, that's a slice. And then if you look at 10 years, you can see COVID will be way off. And then just to make sure we're on track, you know, I think that would be nice to see 10-year data at some point.
We'll see what we can do. Obviously, we have the
I
data.
understand
We
this
have the
now.
data available. I will say there's two things we take into consideration, especially in a 10-year. Font size, and the number, and the amount of data we're able to provide, and so, yeah, I mean, I hear your
Talking further
suggestions,
about
and
maybe
we'll,
how to concisely frame that.
yeah.
How far do the budgets go back on our website? Do we go back 10 years? I can't remember. I haven't seen one for a while.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, put less burden on them if that's, and I've done that many times. I do look at those old budgets and compare them to the current one, just so I can see a percentage of my own. My first recommendation would be study those as well.
No, I value your input, and we will see how to best incorporate it. Again, we don't, you know, we just kind of use the go forward.
Oh, yeah.
Continue doing what we need, so I
And I'm fine
appreciate
doing
those
some homework.
comments, and we'll look at making some of those improvements you've asked for.
And I'd be happy with an Excel spreadsheet. I absolutely could do some fun little things with it, but
Well,
to do my own work.
I
yeah.
can't watch Blue Bloods. I look at those old budgets.
Just make, relax.
All right, are we good on questions here? All right, next is any commissioner comments? Start with you, Bruce.
I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, the Charlie Kirk assassination yesterday. Very sad. Somebody lost a father and a husband, and generation lost a voice. Don't know motives clearly at this point, but I think it's safe to assume that it was politically motivated. And I think it's just a good reminder for us on our part to make sure that we are being mindful with our words and our actions and disagreeing without being disagreeable with one another. So,
I did mine already for you.
All right. Pete?
And I'll save mine for next week.
Just thank you for all the hard work that went into this. I mean, this is a big deal, and I hope that we can all continue to do the good work that's been done to keep us in a financially stable position.
Likewise, I want to thank Todd, John, the administration, the staff, department directors, and other elected officials for their input. It's very valuable. I did read the entire packet twice. I'll probably read it again. This is my passion, and I just want to appreciate all the time and the hard work that went into this. I think you guys did a good job with the presentation and things. I really appreciate that, so thank you.
Thanks.
Next is administrator's report. You have any-
I've talked enough for today, huh?
All right, is there any other business?
I don't have any, sir.
Okay, we're adjourned, 11:12.
Ooh, getting up is always fun.